Okay, thank you very much, Jordi, for this the introduction, and thanks also to all participants who are here to listen to this introductory presentation on the Monesi landslide. As Jordi was saying, the aim of the webinar is to provide some background information on landslides in Italy, and more particularly in the Liguria region, where the case study is based, and also to provide some details on the actions that guided the preparedness and the response phase to this event in Monesi. And also Claudia will give some more technical details on the type of landslide that occurred. So to start, I would like to provide some information generally on landslides in Europe. Landslides are one of the most widespread geohazards in Europe. They produce a significant impact in terms of human lives and also social and economic damages. The risk of landslide is likely to be increasing in the next future because of rapid population growth, especially in urban context, and also because of we may expect an increase in extreme weather events, also because of climate change. So despite of this increased risk, we don't have many European countries in Europe that have landslide risk included in their legislation. And also we have, there is lack of an official methodological assessment guidelines. So Herrera et al., from where this map is taken, suggests that we would need a European landslide directive, similarly to the floods directive, which would provide a common legal framework for dealing with the landslides in Europe. So they have been mapping Herrera et al. Landslide events in Europe, and have included around 900 landslides in their database. The exact reference to this publication is provided at the end of these slides. And they suggest in their mapping exercises that 2/3 of these landslides have occurred in Italy. Indeed, you see that Italy is the only red country in this map. And also they suggest that we need a greater coordination effort in order to increase landslide data integration and harmonization. So focusing on Italy, which is the red country in the previous map, it is not surprising that Italy has carried out a more detailed landslide mapping exercise in 2007. This is called IFI, Inventario dei fenomeni franosi in Italia, landslides event inventory, and it is regularly updated by the ISPRA, Istituto Superiore per la Protezione e la Ricerca Ambientale, in collaboration with Italian regions. And the more recent, the results of this mapping exercise is a very detailed cartography online and an annual report on landslides in Italy. And the more recent report that was issued last year covered more than 620 events in an area of more than 23 thousand square meters, which corresponds more or less to 8% of the Italian territory. So this is a very important project because it provides historical data, which, as we know, are very important also for planning future protection actions. This is a map taken from the report, the latest report last year, where in red you can see the most the areas of the Italian territory which are at the highest risk of landslide. So it shows the landslide risk density in Italian regions. And on the top left, I have included the reference to where the Liguria region is, and here we have our case study of Monesi di Mendatica is based. And also here we will have our demonstration in April in Savona. So you can see all the areas colored in red and yellow, which presents medium or high risk of landslide events occurring. The report prepared by ISPRA also presents this table, which combines risk of landslide, as previously indicated, with population density. And the outcome is pretty worrisome, because you can see that the Liguria region presents by far the highest percentage in Italy of population at risk of landslides. We have other regions as well with very high risk for the population, but again, Liguria is presents by far the highest percentage. And here you have a more detailed map of the Liguria region. You can see Genova and in the middle of the map, and then if you go on the left, I have included a blue arrow. That is where to indicate where Monesi di Mendatica is based. Yes, so we are taking into consideration the landslide that occurred in Monesi on November 21st, 2016. Monesi is a very small village in the alpine area of the Imperia province. And it occurred, this landslide occurred after heavy rainfalls which caused large terrain movements. And for more technical details about this landslide, I give the floor to Claudia.
Hi, good morning. So I take now the voice, and I will be presenting a little bit the geological and geomorphological context of the Monesi landslide. Well, first, I would like to highlight that in this area, the geological material, so the bedrock, is a flysch that is constituted by, actually it's the flysch di San Remo, that is constituted by a marly turbidite, and there's a base of 1 to 5 meters of calcareous sandstone. Over this material, there's a thick package of quaternary material that actually belongs to a paleo landslide, so a landslide that occurred in the past, in a past geological era, so some millions of years ago. And so this is the material that was actually involved in the new landslide, so in the 2016 landslide. The layers of geomaterials in this area, so the layers of the bedrock are more or less dipping to the northeast, so it's similar orientation as the orientation of the landslide that occurred, even if it's not exactly. But to highlight that in the bottom part of the slope, where the landslide occurred, actually, the small landslide occurred, there's an increase of the dipping of the layers. And actually, at the bottom of the slope, there's a river, so the Tanarello River. So, if Silvia, you can move to the next slide. Okay. So the Monesi, the village, is placed on the top of this ancient landslide, which actually involved more than 10 million cubic meters of material. You can see it in this nice geological scheme provided by the CNR, by our colleagues, researcher colleagues in the CNR ERP in Torino. So here the gray material that you can see is the old landslide, the big one. And there's a very small, tiny slide in the left part of the geological scheme, where you can see the small landslide, the one that occurred in 2016. So it is just below the Monesi village. In this case, in the left image, you can see a map of the area that involved the ancient complex landslide. That is, the contour is in red, and in yellow you can see the small one. So this small one that occurred in 2016, it involved about 10 to 15 meters of material, and in total it was between 60,000 and 80,000 cubic meters of material. But actually the rainfall in the 24th of November in 2016, it didn't only trigger the small landslide, but it actually reactivated the old one. So it was a quite complex movement at the end. And probably that's why it got also quite interesting case study, because it triggered a small landslide that was really destructive for the village, but it also was moving the big one. Silvia, if you can move. Okay, thanks. So at the end, what happened was that there was a big rainfall, that actually it was an extremely high amount of rainfall, about 700 millimeters of rainfall at the upper part of the Tanarello catchment. That was exceeding the most important recorded rainfall events in the Piemonte region for the last 50 years. So actually this rainfall was causing first some floods and some erosive events in the area. So first of all, a kind of hydrological response on the rainfall, but then after this hydrologic and erosive response, the rainfall, this rotational landslide was triggered. This was causing the major damages in the village, as you can see in the pictures that actually were also provided by the CNR ERP in Torino. And you can see here big damages in buildings, in roads, and well, actually Sylvia can provide more details, but the village was evacuated, all the people was moved. And even after the rainfall, the big landslide, so the ancient one, kept moving for some days, reaching a total movement of more than 2 meters in 1 week. So this was actually a big event, not only the destructive one, but it was also moving for a while afterwards in a slow velocity, but still moving. So that's more or less the geological and geomorphological context. So Sylvia, I give you back the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Claudia, for your presentation. And the last couple of slides focuses more on the actions that were taken for the Monesi case studies, but in general would be taken for similar events in Italy. So HEIMDALL is interested both in the preparedness phase and in the acute response phase. And in Savona we will we aim to demonstrate how the functionalities of the system can support both phases of an emergency. So starting with the preparedness phase, as you know, this phase covers all actions that are performed to prepare for an emergency event. So including the requirements to assess the risk and to set up emergency response plans, as well as one of the key important actions is to keep the population informed. And here this slide presents some of these actions and these documents for Monesi. As you might be aware, Italy was did not approve any legislation against or to cover hydrogeological risk until 1989, when a law was approved but was not actually implemented in practice until tragic events of a landslide occurring in Sarno, in the south of Italy, in Campania region. And since that event, a decree was approved that now requires local authorities to assess the risk, to take precautionary measures, and to inform the population. So the first document on the left is an example of a plan for to respond to emergencies at the provincial level, while the document in between is a plan to respond to emergencies at more local level, where villages are together and they plan for future emergencies. And while on the right we have the communication campaign by the Italian Civil Protection that is called Io non rischio, and aims at sharing with the population some best practices depending on the different types of emergencies that can be geological hazards, hydro hazards, but also earthquakes and so on. So this is for the preparedness side. While looking more at the response phase, we will cover in HEIMDALL for the case studies a time frame that goes that covers the whole day, so from the morning until the afternoon. We have set as a 3 p.m. The time for when the emergency response was actually activated. We will be dealing with a set of important impacts, as also Claudia was mentioning in her presentation. So the key impacts was that the road between San Bernardo and Monesi was completely covered by the terrain, and so Monesi remained isolated from the rest of the area. One house was completely destroyed, but many of the houses in Monesi were condemned and heavily damaged, and so that the whole village was evacuated, even if luckily there were no human casualties. But nevertheless, the majority of people had to be rescued from the houses and evacuated in safe areas. We also have identified some key players who were responsible for the emergency response phase, such as the civil protection and the firefighters operators, Italian Red Cross, and the local police. So any one of these actors, for their own responsibility, were participating in the Monesi landslide emergency response plan. And yes, finally, as promised, here are a few the references I was mentioning before. On the first one is the landslides database, and the second one is the report on the hydrogeological risk in Italy. And I thank you all for listening to our presentation.